Slay the night with best dressed Halloween costumes. From a little scary to way trendy to coordinated looks with your squad, Walmart's got you covered. Find the costumes you love right here at Walmart.
In the time it takes us to say we're making a damn delicious caramel iced coffee with Folgers Instant Coffee, you know we're all about that drizzle. You could be savoring every sip. Damn right. It's Folgers Instant.
It's Croctober, the official celebration of Crocs fans like you. So whether you like to rock your classic clogs, get cozy and fuss-lined, personalize with your favorite Jibbitz charms, or even, dress up like a clog for Halloween, it's time to tell your story and share your style. Join the Croctober celebration with Crocs fans around the world. Go to crocs.com to discover the range of shoes and find a pair that's iconic like you. Crocs, celebrating you all month long.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best-of playlists of your favorite bands and artists, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Hello to all of our listeners in Sarnia, Ontario, and around the world. We are in for a good one because every now and then, one of our regular guests says, hey, we should do this episode, and I'm like, cool. I know one song, but I'm game for it. Let's go down that road. Today is that day because our good friend Sean Faust is back on the show. Sean, how are you doing, man?
I am psyched to do this episode, and at the same time, I'm sorry. But but that's all I have to say because there's no such thing as a bad album, just bad taste.
All right. So for all of our listeners who just decided to hit play on the latest episode and didn't look at the cover art, please explain to our listeners what we're doing today.
We are doing Savatage, the one of the most underrated guitar players of the 80s, Chris Oliva, one of the greatest rock metal vocalists, Zach Stevens, who comes later, but I mean, just Christmas Eve Sarajevo was actually originally on a Savatage album before TSO. All you family people. Not hating on TSO. I'm glad that Savatage is actually playing arenas, just under a different name. And some of those, some of these songs that you've just heard for the first time, by the way, some of them got reworked into TSO songs. Like Not What You See at the end of Dead Winter Dead is like something called Kyrie at the end of the first album. And yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get to it. But Savatage, it's Savatage, people. We are talking about Savatage, not Beastie Boys Sabotage, Savatage with a V.
Do you know how many people I had to correct when I said, oh yeah, no, Savatage episodes, like Sabotage? I'm like, no, Savatage.
Well, they can't stand it. They know you planned it.
Oh God, don't get that song stuck in my head. Don't get that song stuck in my head. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to go through the 12 studio album discography of Savatage. We are, as always, not covering any best ofs and no live albums. Now, Sean mentioned a few other artists here, so let me make it very clear. We are only covering Savatage albums. We're not doing Trans-Siberian Orchestra. We're not doing John Oliva's Pain. We're not doing Dr. Butcher. We're not doing any of those other projects. We are only covering Savatage, and we are going to be picking one song only from each of those albums. And our journey begins on April 11th, 1983, and the release of Sirens. The band at this point is John Oliva, Chris Oliva, Keith Collins, and Steve Wackles. And I apologize if I messed up that name. Remember, idiot Canadian in a basement with a microphone. That's me. The album hit number 16 on the German charts. So, debut album, and it took them a bit to get to this album because they had been playing live and then they finally put a lot of these songs down on vinyl. What did you go with from that first studio album?
I honestly thought I was going to go with the title track because I've heard them do it live a bunch of times and it's just a great song, but I went with On the Run.
I'll agree with you that Sirens was on my short list. This one was interesting because I wasn't quite expecting this, and for our dear listeners, let me explain my knowledge of Savatage going into this episode. Gutter Ballet, when it was released, the title track from that album was played on Much Music a lot. And because I was that kid who would come home from high school and watch Much Music endlessly, like, think about kids today. They just go home and they watch like gameplay videos of YouTube. That was me and Much Music. You couldn't pull me away from freaking Much Music, which is why I am the way I am. Sorry, not sorry. But aside from that, there was Christmas Eve, Sarajevo 1224. So everything else is complete discovery for me. So I went into this complete virgin territory for a lot of these albums. And as I'm going through this, one song really stuck out. Got to side 2, second last track, Scream Murder. And I think the reason why, and I've mentioned it on the show before, whenever I go in cold into an album or into an artist, some of the things I listen for are things that I know, or at least elements of other artists that I know I already like. So with Scream Murder, you have almost like a galloping Steve Harris kind of bass line. But then there's parts of the song where I'm like, well, this is like Knight Rider from Queensryche. And the fact that they came out in the same year, the Queensryche, first ever EP, and this has to be one of those great minds think alike kind of things.
Oh, hell yes, sir. Although I kind of prefer this to Knight Rider from the Queensryche EP, and I love that Queensryche EP.
Oh, Queensryche EP is good. And by the way, dear Queensryche listeners, especially over in Europe, Queensryche is getting ready to head over there and do the EP and the Warning in their entirety. They've already done that tour here in North America, and having seen it, it was absolutely fantastic. So go get yourself some classic Queensryche if you're in Europe. But now we move on to the Dungeons Are Calling EP, released 1984, and it hit number 15 on the German charts. Small sample size, but what'd you go with?
All right, so this is the album where it kind of sounds like, I don't know, you didn't grow up around here, but it might have been the same for you, like when metal was kind of a new thing. And around this time, it was still new, developing, finding itself. Every album had that certain sound, like all the guitars sounded like that. The bass and drums were mixed like that. They all had that, like, we recorded on a shoestring budget in a garage. And no song on this, I guess we'll call it an EP, even though it's got like a bunch of tunes. No song on this captures that vibe and that production and that feeling, and even like just the approach to the melody and the songwriting, except By the Grace of the Witch. And even if you say it like, By the Grace of the Witch, that's how they're singing it. And it's just so gang vocal metal.
Love it. Love it. I had the Dungeons Are Calling on my short list, but it's funny how you mentioned like everyone had that sound. So as I get to, once again, the second last track on the album, I ended up going with City Beneath the Surface. And as I'm listening to this, I'm like, this feels like almost like a good Megadeth song. Like John Oliva actually has a sort of Mustaine kind of growl, going on. And I'm like, at this point, because this is what I do, I listen to the entire discography in chronological order because I'm extra like that. I'm like, is this what I'm about to expect? Because this sounds much different than what I remember from Gutter Ballet, but I really liked how it kind of crunched through this.
There are toys, and then there are freak-out-worthy toys. Toys that get big reactions like,
OMG, no way!
Or,
Best present ever!
Or,
It's what I've always wanted.
For those toys, you need Walmart. They've got exclusives from major brands like Disney, Barbie, and Adventure Force that you can't find anywhere else. Toys that make kids jump for joy.
Thank you!
And make you a hero for giving them. Shop hundreds of exclusive toys.
Yes!
Welcome to your Walmart. Slay the night with best dressed Halloween costumes. From a little scary to way trendy to coordinated looks with your squad, Walmart's got you covered. Find the costumes you love right here at Walmart.
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimp and Way.
Yes, MailChimp and Way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp?
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
We now move on to Power of the Night, released April 15th, 1985. Hit number 61 in Germany. There were 2 singles off of this one, Hard for Love and In the Dream. So obviously this sounds diversifying a little bit from some of that earlier crunch, and we got a bit more dynamics going on here. What's your pick off of Power of the Night?
So it's a short list. The short list being the title track is on my short list because it's got that like Turbo Lover kind of keyboard intro thing going on. And it just, like you said, it's a little more polished. It's a little more dynamic. But I went with Warriors because it's like quintessential 80s metal lyrics. It's like if Manowar took themselves a bit more seriously lyrically. That's Warriors. So I think I got to go with Warriors.
See, I actually had Fountain of Youth on my short list, but I did end up going with The Power of the Night, the title track. And I think there's a few things that led to this. Being a bassist, I really found myself kind of connecting with the bass groove on this. But John Oliva, if you're listening to some of these earlier albums, when he's on lead vocals before Zach Stevens comes into the fray, he hits the higher registers pretty good. But John Oliva in the lower registers, really solid, like absolutely solid. Going through, I'm listening to some songs, I'm like, okay, he's starting to get into a little too much screaming and starting to pull me out of it. When he stays in that mid-range, that lower register, you can't go wrong in some of these earlier albums.
I'm with you. And it's weird too because we haven't even gotten to like where they become the Savatage that all of us Savatage fans know and love. Like we're still like in early 80s metal. I'm like, remember Riot with Thundersteel and their song Thunder Streets? Like that kind of stuff that nobody remembers anymore, or Kick-Axe or whatever their name was called for the Transformers soundtrack.
Oh, what?
I can't remember.
Wasn't that Spectre General?
Spectre General, that's it. Spectre General, right.
Yeah.
But I've got the Kick-Axe album, and it sounds exactly like you think it would, because it's got, except they do a really, really good cover of Joe Cocker's version of With a Little Help from My Friends. But anyway, I digress. We're talking about the mighty Savatage, and what you said about John Oliva's voice, even when he's not like, his high notes are great, like he's good at what he's doing, but he's commanding. And
yes.
Like, one of those things is like, even if you're not liking the song, you're like, man, this guy like is really like, he is intent on me paying attention to this.
And I think that's the thing too. There are bands that have gone through sound changes over the years. And going into this, my frame of reference was Gutter Ballet. My frame of reference was Christmas Eve. So these earlier albums, I'm like, this is more crunchy, more 80s, more thrash era type stuff. Like this would fit in with those early like Kill 'Em All type albums. And it's interesting to hear that progression as you get closer to what Savatage and TSO sound like today. Fight for the Rock, released June 30th, 1986. We have a member change at this point. Keith Collins is no longer on bass. Johnny Lee Middleton has come into the fray. The album hit number 158 on the Billboard 200 and number 67 in Germany. Now, in preparing for this album or for this episode, Sean sends me this message saying, yeah, I guess I'll have to listen to Fight for the Rock again. Being the Savatage fan that you are, does this album kind of stick out like a sore thumb for you?
It did until I listened to it again for the first time, and I want to say 30 years. And not as much. Power of the Night actually stuck out more than this to me, but I also knew like this album has its reason for existing that has nothing to do with Savatage, actually. And I don't mind trash talking this album because they do.
When they take a look back at their discography, this is one that was very heavily kind of label influenced. They wanted the band to get on the radio to put out songs that would have worked kind of thing, to try and sound like everybody else out there rather than try to sound like themselves. So you do have almost a forced feel to some of these songs, even though, and again, this is for me, not having listened to a damn full Savatage album at all, just, 2 songs. I got to go into this fresh, not knowing any of the backstory and not having that frame of reference to compare it to. So there were some interesting spots for me off of this one. So I'm curious, you who listened to Savatage for many, 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 many moons, your pick and how you felt going through these songs again.
I'll be honest, it's probably my 3rd time in my life listening to this album from front to back. One thing I thought was fun is Badfinger known more for people covering them, like Mariah Carey, Lillian Axe, or Savatage, and the end of Breaking Bad? Because it just seems like, I heard Without You for the first time because I actually owned the Badfinger album. But No Matter What is the reason I bought that Badfinger album, and I heard it first by Lillian Axe. Anyway, but I didn't go with that. But I remember listening to it like, wait a second, I don't remember this being on the album. And then I was like listening, like Out on the Streets. Wait, doesn't that close out Sirens? But this is a much better recording than Sirens. They've got a bit of a budget, and it is that poppier, like, here's the 12-string. All the people are gonna like this slow song that becomes heavy. We like that, and that's a formula that worked for many years until it didn't. But I went with The Edge of Midnight because this sounds the closest to the direction they ended up going in.
I can see that. I can absolutely see that. For me, going through this, my pick is Crying for Love. Again, on side 1 of the cassette.
Cool tune.
Oh, great tune. I will say, in hindsight, if you had the money to go back and re-record this, I'd love to hear that intro kind of done on a classical acoustic guitar instead of on the keyboards that it's done on. But I listened to this and I'm like, okay, it has that very Bad English kind of feel. And the funny thing is, Bad English was around this time as well, as I recall. You have that super group with that very radio friendly sound. You got groups like Alias out there. So you have, 80s.
Not yet, though. Not
yet. But
he was actually writing for John Waite. He wanted to write these songs for John Waite to use because John Waite was already huge with Missing You. I can't remember what the other tune was, but everybody knows Missing You.
Yeah.
But the supergroup thing, like Mr. Big, Alias, Bad English, and that's what they were trying to get them to do before these other bands.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny thing, by the way, John Waite, Missing You, phenomenal cover of that done by Chris de Burgh. So if you love that song.
Oh, wow.
And it is a fantastic cover. Absolutely fantastic.
Too. I mean, there's another legend.
Right? You can find that song on his Beautiful Dreams album, which is fan-freaking-tastic. And I know Chris de Burgh is actually on the whiteboard for episodes to do on this show, but I also know how many goddamn albums Chris de Burgh has put out and is still putting out albums today and still touring today.
You might as well do Zappa while you're at it.
Yeah. If we switch to Tangerine Dream, we're going to be here for way too long.
Yep.
Way too long.
Well, if you went with film scores, man, Hans Zimmer has 300 credits, 152 soundtracks.
Yeah, we're going to be here for a year covering that episode. That's going to be like parts 1 through 17, I think. Hall of the Mountain King, released September 28th, 1987. Hit number 116 on the Billboard 200, number 26 in Germany, and number 48 in Switzerland. There were 2 singles off of this one, Hall of the Mountain King and Strange Wings. Coming off of Fight for the Rock, and kind of what the label made, not made them do, but highly suggested that they do for that album. This album kind of feels like they're 2112.
I can go along with that.
Yeah. I mean, just as far as kind of claiming your identity by putting an album out, because anyone who has watched any of the Rush documentaries and they're talking about how going into 2112, there was a lot of pressure from the label to put something out there that was going to sell. They're like, well, you know what? We may have this one last chance, and this is the album we're going to do, and we're going to put it out there, and we're going to be, come hell or high water, we're going to be us. This is what they did, and then Rush is Rush. Hall of the Mountain King, though, fantastic album.
Absolutely. And if you can find time to watch Zach Stevens show. I'm sure there's something on YouTube or maybe one of the live albums. Hearing him do the title track, especially the end, is it's a sound to behold. But on this album, John Oliva sounds great.
Oh yeah.
And this sounds like him coming in. Like this band hasn't even come into their own yet. This is them going, here is what we're capable of. And even like them doing the Hall of the Mountain, but it's got a different title on the album. I remember when Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor did the score for Social Network, and they used that piece, and I was like, that's interesting, but why didn't they just why didn't they just use Savatage? I mean, of course, I know that they were getting paid to do it, but it's interesting. But Savatage just does this really cool version, and I went with the title track because, God damn it, what a way to like either close a show or open an album. I understand why it is where it lays on this album, but man, lyrically, melodically, just that bow down, just this is like their Keeper of the Seven Keys. We'll go with that.
Yeah. I actually had Legions on my short list.
That's a great song, too.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm going with their other single, Strange Wings. Not just because of the groove, but the breakdown really hooked me. And the harmonies on this. This is where I'm like, finally, the harmonies and the vocals. Because before, it really kind of felt like just John Oliva. But the minute you start throwing those harmonies in there, it brings the song to that next level. And Strange Wings really kind of stood out for me. I'm like, all of a sudden, now I feel like I'm listening to the Savatage that I was expected going into this. Gutter Ballet, released December 1st, 1989. The album hit number 124 on the Billboard 200, number 47 in Germany, and number 84 in the Netherlands. And then, in 2022, it re-hit the charts in Germany, hitting number 7. There were 2 singles off of this one, When the Crowds Are Gone, and, of course, Gutter Ballet. So this is where I kind of chime in as far as like, oh, hey, I remember this. This is where I kind of came into the picture. But then I go back and listen to the album because I remember, too, like Gutter Ballet was kind of stuck in my head for the longest time around that time. And I'm like, this isn't how I remembered it. I don't remember it. I remembered it being stronger than I thought it was going back. It's kind of like your reverse Fight for the Rock, where originally you're like, oh, this is not good. And you go back, it's like, okay, maybe it's not so bad. Here, I'm like, this is pretty good originally. And I'm like, yeah, but there's better on the album.
Fair. I get that. And also, all right, so this is my introduction to Savatage as a full album. My brother had Hall of the Mountain King, but it didn't grab me. He had all of those like 80s guitar rock guys and metal guys, like Richie Kotzen's first solo album. Like he had all that. So Hall of the Mountain King, I had kind of known just the title track and the but Gutter Ballet was the first one that I just was like, what is this? And I listened to it like beginning to end constantly. And did you have Sesame Street growing up?
Oh, yes, we did.
Okay, and you know those little things where they would like go through a milk factory or they would go through like, you know, feeding a chicken. So think of that milk factory, right? And then think of Silk and Steel, that so that this nice little acoustic piece that like at the end you just go, milk.
Oh, thank God. I thought you for a second you were going to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
what
12.
What a great groove that song is.
Sesame Street slaps. That's all there is to it.
You know, it's better than the f***ing GoBots. I thought of you the other day because I was watching Lethal Weapon and Danny Glover goes to the kid, I bet you like GoBots. I'm like, the one thing that makes this movie not timeless is the mention of GoBots. But we're talking about Gutter Ballet, where John Oliva, they're working on this album, and he goes and sees Phantom of the Opera. And he comes back, he's like, I want to go into this more like musical direction, like, you know, big musicals. And he wrote Gutter Ballet in the studio that night. It might have been the last song they recorded. I don't remember. I wasn't there. I wasn't invited. But the song that grabbed me the most is When the Crowds Are Gone, and that is my choice.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I love that you mentioned Silk and Steel because it's actually on my short list. Because I love the instrumental. They have a knack for writing some fantastic instrumentals. And Gutter Ballet is also on my short list. But I ended up going with Hounds.
Yeah, I knew you were going to. For some reason, I was like, this is going to be Jason's pick. Do you hear the hounds they call?
Mainly, though, because of Chris Oliva and his guitar work on this.
Dude, oh my God, that guy was such an incredible guitar. Even Temptation Revelation, the other instrumental on that album, just his playing on this album is like where he's really starting to be like, you know, I'm more than just this thrash metal shredder. And this is the album where he was like, hi, hello, check this out. The reason I went with Crowds is not only for the I wanted to know, wanted to see, wasted my time till time wasted me, but I don't want to call it a guitar solo. I want to call it more that middle eight section with that beautiful, like it's a 2/5 progression with that just like slow little melodic guitar interlude, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Oliva. But tell me more about Hounds. Tell me more about Hounds. Do you hear them? Because they call.
Right. The other thing too is you kind of mentioned like underrated bands, and like you think about some of the most heralded guitarists of the 80s and even in the early 90s. And I don't remember Chris Oliva being mentioned as often as he probably should. And going back and listening to this, I'm like, why the hell wasn't he? Like,
he and Vito Bratta are the unsung heroes of 80s guitar.
Yeah. And then going into the early 90s, you easily throw in Pete Lesperance from Harem Scarum into that mix as well, because Pete Lesperance is a phenomenal guitarist.
I knew you were going to mention them at some point, too.
I wear my Harem Scarum love right out on Front Street. Like, if you haven't listened to Harem Scarum, dear listeners, do yourself a favor, because there's 15 albums for you to dive into. So go give yourself a buffet right there. But no, Chris Oliva's guitar work all through this run, like constantly, like I knew what to expect from Alex Skolnick. I knew what to expect from Al Pitrelli. And it's like, Chris Oliva, freaking-tastic. And imagine being Skolnick going in and saying, okay, well, now I have to match that epicness.
Yeah. Epic. Epic is definitely the perfect word to describe Oliva's approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything with Savatage, I think, feels kind of like epic, especially as you get to the later albums. But still, even in those earlier ones, his guitar work was a voice unto itself. Streets, a rock opera, released October 4th, 1991, hit number 31 on the Billboard Heatseekers charts. And in 2022, I don't know why, and I looked it up, I couldn't find out why. It seemed like every Savatage album was hitting the charts in 2022 in Germany, because this one peaked at number 9 in 2022. So I don't know what happened in 2022.
I do. Let me tell you what happened. All the albums got reissued on vinyl.
Oh.
And that's what happened, and they were limited edition. But I think people were just like, oh my God, I remember them. Let me buy that album.
Yeah. Because, and I'm going through this like, I'm seeing a trend. Because like almost every single Savatage album re-hit the charts in Germany, and they hit them fairly high, which is fantastic.
It was like Hall of the Mountain King through Wake of Magellan, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's...
There were 2 singles off of this album, Jesus Saves and Sammy and Tex. So if you haven't figured out by the title, a rock opera, it's a concept album. A little bit of storytelling going on here. And I think going through this is one of the harder aspects of this show. Maybe you'll agree with me or maybe you won't. But when you're dealing with like just an album full of songs, you can sit there and say, okay, I like that song or I like this song. But when you get to concept albums, like I like this song only because of where it is in the story. Like you have to take the grander scope of the album into consideration, because sometimes, I mean, a song could be good, but that might not be where you put it on the album, and it kind of breaks the flow a little bit because it has to flow with the storyline. Do you find it harder? Because you've done a few shows here. Do you find it harder picking one song off a concept album versus just a regular album of songs?
Oh, we're going to talk about that a lot tonight, I think. Yeah, I kind of do, because, I mean, if you look at the last 2 tracks of this album, Somewhere in Time and Believe feel like one song on this album. So Sammy and Tex comes out of You're Alive, which also the bam, 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 bam was also reused by TSO. But I digress. But it's also like some of these tunes just go together. So it was tough. And my choice, however, this is also when they get into those big ballads. They kind of got into that with When the Crowds Are Gone and Summer Rain. But this one is chock full of these big, epic piano ballads, like almost Jim Steinman-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Minus the 100,000 key changes in 12 parts in 10 minutes. Not shaming Steinman at all, but I'll start my choice by saying this. Brian of my weekly mixtape, I am sorry. I know you loved Money for the Toll covering Believe. I know that you love the song Believe. My choice from Streets of Rock Opera, also one of my favorite concept albums of all time. First being Operation Mindcrime. My choice from Streets of Rock Opera is If I Go Away. I love the arrangement, I love the melodies, I love the guitar work, and I love the lyrics. So I went with If I Go Away from Streets of Rock Opera. I got a feeling you went with something heavier.
First of all, I'm glad you mentioned Believe, because I have seen a video of Money for the Toll playing that song. So well done, good sir.
Oh,
well
wow.
done.
And it was a Canadian Neil Diamond version. It was a Neil Diamond version of a Canadian duo intro into Believe, I Believe You Watch. Is this correct?
Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, yes, indeed.
Wow.
It was fantastic. I was like,
thank you.
That's awesome. I actually had A Little Too Far, Strange Reality, and Heal My Soul on my short list. But Sean, when you're right, you're right. I ended up going with If I Go Away.
Nice.
So
can I just talk about A Little Too Far really quick?
Go for it.
Kind of like where I was talking about Sesame Street with Silk and Steel. I think this is this album's Sesame Street song, because every time I just think of Puppet, gotta get back, and I just think like, can you tell me how to like? So it's like, gotta get back. I wanna go to Sesame Street. Gotta get back. But man, what? See,
right?
If I Go Away, it's a beautiful tune.
Thank God we had this discussion after I listened to the albums, because then I'd get to that point and be like, Sesame Street. God damn it, Sean.
These are the only two Sesame Street related songs, if I recall. So, or well, to me, Sesame Street related.
Right. But as I'm listening to If I Go Away, and we've talked about my frame of reference for this song before, because, dear listeners, if you listen to our Pink Floyd episode, you know that we both have a bit of a love for The Final Cut. It's a fantastic album. This felt like a harder version of something that could have fit on The Final Cut.
Just not as angry at Thatcher.
Fair, very fair indeed. We now move on to Edge of Thorns, released April 6, 1993. We have a small member addition. Zach Stevens now joins the band, taking over on vocals. John Oliva is still a member of Savatage. He's playing piano and keyboards and doing a lot of the production work behind the scenes. Peaked at number 23 on the Billboard Heatseekers charts, number 52 in Japan, number 79 in Germany. There were two singles off of this one, Edge of Thorns and He Carves His Stone. Edge of Thorns actually charted, hitting number 26 on the U.S. mainstream rock chart. So their first single to actually chart on any of the Billboard charts. Zach Stevens entering the fold in this one. Holy crap, does he add... And I don't mean to, when I say this, I'm not trying to take away from what John Oliva did on vocals, but holy crap, did they bring everything up a notch by bringing Zach Stevens on board?
He just, and we haven't even gotten to like what Zach Stevens is really capable of. We don't get to that until the next album, but Edge of Thorns is still like, hey, everybody, we're just going to up our game a bit. And John Oliva, like, he's still doing some vocals here and there, but it's not as, like, centric. And, man, when I tell you that Zach Stevens is in, like, my top 5 favorite singers, I'm sorry, vocalists. This is not a guy that sings. This is a guy who vocalizes beautifully. Mm-hmm. He's up there with Russell Allen for me. I just love this dude's voice so much.
Yeah, I was getting some Jeff Scott Soto vibes as well off of his vocals.
I mean, I don't remember. You'll never forget. You see what I did there? I reversed it.
So off of Edge of Thorns, what did you go with?
Actually, I'm going to take guest protocol. I'm going to ask you what you went with. Did you go with Damien?
I did not go with Damien. I will admit I kind of skipped by Damien. It didn't hit with me. It didn't. I had on my short list, and let me get through this because this is a long short list because I really, really freaking enjoyed this album. He Carves His Stone, Follow Me, Edge of Thorns, Sleep, and the amazing piano work from Exit Music. You know, we've been talking about their instrumentals. But I ended up going with All That I Bleed. And this is one of those times where it's the combination of John Oliva's piano work and Zach Stevens' vocals. Like, this song was very show-stopping for me. Like, I'll listen to the album and I'll sit there and about halfway through, if I'm still listening, I'm like, nope, okay, this is a good one. Or if I'm just hitting skip at that point. That's kind of my gauge for, because when you have to listen to this many albums to prepare for an episode, sometimes you do justly or not justly skip a song or two. All That I Bleed had me stopped in my tracks. It's such a great combination with Oliva on piano and Stevens on vocals.
I'm with you. I love that you mentioned Follow Me, because that's like, there's some like interesting complex guitar work going on. And there's the man who sees what he wants to see, blah, blah, blah. I've covered Sleep doing the solo thing. I love Sleep. But I went with a song where the piano beginning, I can also sing, I know it's late, I know you're sleeping. And finally, this episode, you and I have the same pick. It's All That I Bleed for me as well. Especially when he gets that, Lord, bring on the night. Oh my God. All That I Bleed. Are there any other songs on this album? I don't know. Maybe. But they're not All That I Bleed.
That is 2 albums in a row where we have lined up. So that is awesome.
I honestly do love the whole album, but All That I Bleed sticks out like a green thumb.
Yeah. This is, I will say this is the longest shortlist I have for this entire discography. Like, there was so much to choose from off of this. And I think a lot of it has to deal with Zach Stevens on vocals. It as I'm listening, I'm like, either John Oliva got really, really good, and then you do the research like, oh, that explains it. Okay. And again, not taking anything away from John Oliva, but Zach Stevens was definitely another step up as far as the production goes and as far as the songwriting goes. Because all of a sudden now you have a different range to work with and you can do different things with the songs.
And I think we're getting to that.
Oh, we are definitely getting to that.
The magic of Zach Stevens.
On Handful of Rain, released August 16th, 1994, we do have a member change. Alex Skolnick is now on guitar. This album was released following the passing of Chris Oliva. And while Johnny Lee Middleton and Steve Ockels are credited as bass and drums on this, they're not. John Oliva did all of those parts himself. Jeff Plate also took over touring drumming before becoming a member of the band. The album hit number 31 on the Billboard Heatseekers charts, number 66 in Japan, and number 85 in Germany. There were 2 singles off of this one, the title track, Handful of Rain, and Chance. Handful of Rain I had on my short list. But for me, I went with more of the slower, mid-tempo feel, but definitely the soulful guitar work of Alex Skolnick on this one. I went with Stare Into the Sun.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, no.
Wow, I did not expect that choice.
No, I'm curious what you thought I was going to pick off this one.
I thought this is that album when it first came out, like, I just didn't get it. Like, I liked it. And, like, it's grown on me a lot, too. I remember I used to make fun of Taunting Cobras, and now I listen to them like, this is a ripper. This is awesome. But I thought you might have gone with, like, the title track or Chance just because of Father, can you hear me? This is not how it was meant to be. I am safe and sound. And just how that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds with like, and I saw them open with that, and it was out of this world, man.
Wow.
But yeah, and everybody's on that mic. It was, and when he gets that, look away. So that's on my short list. But I honestly thought you were going to go with like maybe the title track or something heavier.
No, for me, Alex Skolnick was just so soulful on that song. Like, I mean, we all know Alex Skolnick is a fantastic guitarist. You know.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I've seen the guy play jazz with my buddy Nat. No doubt. This guy is a guitarist's guitarist.
Yo, absolutely. This isn't just some shredder. This is someone who like feels the song, and you can hear that in the guitar work and the soloing on this. But what did you go with?
I still can't choose, man. I'm having such a tough time between Alone You Breathe because not only does it conclude the trilogy of When the Crowds Are Gone, Believe, and now we've got Alone You Breathe, but even just like that's got some beautiful melodies. About 3 or 4 Jim Steinman parts. And of course, like the recall to the lyrics of Believe and When the Crowds Are Gone. And that was the first song on the album that I was like, I'm in love with you. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with you. F the rest of this album. And like I said, about a year later, I was like, this album's awesome. I'm going to go with Chance because Chance just does everything. It's like a little mini musical in 7 minutes. And it's that Zach Stevens layering and counterpoint that I'm just in love with.
Yeah, no, it's hard not to pick that song because it is so good. But I will point out here. You mentioned the time. And of course, you once again went with the longest song on the album.
Oops.
It was close. It was close. Chance sits at 7:50 and Alone You Breathe sits at 7:30. So was I looking at the length of some of the songs going, is that going to be Sean's pick? Maybe. But I have good reason to.
Well, I mean, I've been on this show before and we've talked about Dream Theater.
Mm-hmm.
You might be right. You might be right on one of these albums, but you maybe not.
Right. Just wait till we do the eventual transatlantic episode where we've got like one album that has one song and it's like, 75 minutes or something like that?
But it's broken into parts. You're talking about the Whirlwind.
Yeah, but it's still one song, technically speaking.
It's broken into parts. We can, and that would be Dancing with Eternal Glory, just for the record.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
We now
Which is the longest single song on the album, by the way.
Predictable, maybe, but you know what? That's why we love you, Sean. It's all good.
Fair.
Dead Winter Dead, released October 24th, 1995. The band at this point is Zach Stevens, John Oliva, Al Petrelli on guitar, Chris Caffrey also on guitar, Johnny Lee Middleton on bass, and Jeff Plate on drums. The album hit number 18 on the Billboard Heatseekers charts, number 68 in Japan, and number 80 in Germany. There were 3 singles off of this one. Doesn't Matter Anyway, Dead Winter Dead, and One Child. And holy crap, this album. As I'm listening to this, and I don't know if you're the same way, so let me get this out there. Normally when I'm listening to a concept album, you sit back, you put the headphones on, you close the eyes. Maybe it's because of my video production background. I tend to usually visualize most concept albums as eventual movies. And Lord knows I've directed Operation Mindcrime in my head multiple times. Alice Cooper's Brutal Planet. I would love to see that as a movie because that's a good album.
It's such a brutal planet.
Right. But this one, I visioned more as a stage play. This screams live theater to me.
I think that's mission accomplished for Savatage. There you go.
Right. I think, honestly, as far as their concept albums go, this is my favorite Savatage concept album. Better than Streets, better than The Wake of Magellan. As from a storytelling standpoint, maybe not necessarily from a musical standpoint, but from a storytelling standpoint, this I would love to see this stage play happen.
Fair enough. I mean, as far as concept goes, I mean, when we get to, we're going to get to Wake of Magellan sooner, but that's 2 stories wound into one.
Mm-hmm.
Streets, probably because I was younger and I was more it was the album that just came out after a very traumatic summer and I was just really digging it. So I'd probably go with that one. It's It's more straightforward than Dead Winter Dead. But now that you say it, I don't know. Definitely a stage play. Definitely a stage play.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what partly influenced my pick off of this album. Shortlisting, I had This Is the Time and Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224, because we all know that song. But you get about halfway through the album, and if you're looking at this as a stage play, this would be the song that would close out the first act. The curtain call, then you go, you get your drinks and you get your little snacks and you go back to the theater once they start to dim the lights, saying, we're about to start the second act, please return to the theater. And you're still talking about that last performance, which would probably be This Isn't What We Meant.
Wow, cool. I thought you were going to say Mozart Madness, but that would open the second.
That would definitely open the second. Because, This Isn't What We Meant. It feels like one of those really powerful songs to end the first act of a stage play. And that's exactly how I envision it. I had my eyes closed. I was like, and you can just, the song ends and the lights go down and then the house lights come up. And then you're like, yep, okay, now I'm wowed. I am absolutely wowed. I was not expecting that, but holy crap, did it blow me away.
Fair enough. I mean, it's a great album. Like, from beginning to end, it's great. There's no filler. Even the Ode to Joy thing is just beautiful. Like, nice little interlude.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, we're both going with side closers. Remember how I talked about, like, Zach Stevens doing his thing on Chance?
Yeah.
Well, he does it once again on Not What You See, which closes out the album. And first of all, I love the melody. I love the lyrics. It's not just because of Zach Stevens doing the Zach Stevens thing. It's just because it's a nice way to, like, wrap up Peruvian Skies, the musical. Think about Peruvian Skies and the story it tells. It's this.
Yeah.
It's this album. Dead Winter Dead was on the short list. Actually, half of this album is the short list. I Am, which is John Oliva on lead vocals. But it's Not What You See. I love their power, for lack of a better term, because it's bigger than a power ballad. It's more like a stage play epic. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you could take this stage play and you could probably rework it to kind of fit into the, the picture of today's global conflicts, and still it would probably work. So, if anyone from Savatage is listening, just saying that I would probably go see that stage play.
Get on it, dude. Get on it, dude.
Just because I take my money at that point. Just take my money. We now move on to The Wake of Magellan, released September 15th, 1997 in Europe and Japan, and April 7th, 1998 in US. The album hit number 28 on the Heatseekers charts, number 11 in Germany, number 44 in Japan, and number 79 in Netherlands. There was one single off of this one, Turns to Me. So yet another concept album, and with the same lineup as Dead Winter Dead. What did you go with?
So The Wake of Magellan is probably their proggiest album. And I saw them on the Dead Winter Dead tour, and they debuted Welcome. Actually, they opened up the show with Welcome, and they also did The Wake of Magellan. It was also, it was Welcome into Chance, by the way, in case you cared. Birch Hill, baby. I loved that place. And you might think I'm going to go with the title track because Zach Stevens does the Zach Stevens thing with the layered vocal parts. This album is prog metal throughout. And some of these melodies, musical themes throughout, I think Dream Theater might have lifted a couple of these melodies for Scenes from a Memory. I'm just saying, just saying, this was a tough album for me because the title track does have all that amazing that Zach Stevens does vocally. It's got the instrumental that's out of this world, but Zach Stevens doesn't do the Zach Stevens on one song, kids. No. I think I'm also going with the longest track on the album again, but I'm going with the Hourglass because he does the Zach Stevens thing, but it kind of like wraps up the story as well, and just the power in his vocals on this track, especially on the Runaway Reasons. Just, God. if there can only be one Savatage album in whole for me, it's The Wake of Magellan.
See, I think for me, if there was only one album, it probably would have been Dead Winter Dead, but this is up there as well. I'm not going to lie. It's funny you mentioned that you were going to go with the longest song. So my short list includes the third longest song, Turns to Me.
Nice.
And then my pick is the second longest song, The Wake of Magellan.
Nice.
So yeah, because of the vocal work that Zach Stevens does and the almost like the counter vocaling. So you've got like the long sustained on one side, it feels like, and then you got like the very short staccato vocal attack going, and listening to it on the speaker systems I was listening to, it's like it felt like it was coming into different ears. So I was like, this is really awesome. So yeah, no, I'm not going to do the over under on how long our playlist is going to be because we're not dealing with super long songs here, but there's some long ones out there. I am curious what the over under would be on, or how the length would be, but we'll find that one out.
They are what they are.
Exactly.
They're songs, and like this is one of those bands too where how they inspired Money for the Toll a lot was let the song be. Don't try to force an extra part in there to make it longer, or don't extend the guitar solo for just to have it extended. Like just let it just breathe. Let the song be what it's going to be. That's why Complete Inside Me on Land, it's like 3 minutes long or something, but it's like it's an epic progressive rock song in 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And
we have this band to thank for it. Sorry. Yes.
And that's the thing too. Like you listen to some Dream Theater songs or some other prog metal bands out there, and it feels sometimes like there's like 2 or 3 songs all in one song because it does have some definite shifts. Savatage, there's more songs sometimes on the album. They're a little bit shorter, and that's kind of where those changes come into play. So yes, you are getting some 6, 7, 8 minute long songs, but they don't feel that long. They don't feel stretched out. They feel exactly the right length for what the song is supposed to be at that time.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Stop. 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 Had enough? Kick out mucus and quiet the cough with Mucinex 12-Hour DM for long-lasting cough and chest congestion relief. Buy Mucinex 12-Hour DM at your local retailer. Use as directed.
In this ad for the Mobile One brand, I have 30 seconds to talk about driving, which might be what you're doing right now. Maybe you're in the car, you're free, you're in control, on an open road with an open calendar. Your mind is wandering, and you're going with it. Or maybe you're stuck at work, in meetings, or emails. Or worse, meetings about emails. And if that's the case, there's only one question. Why? Mobile One, for the love of driving. Visit loveofdriving.us/radio to learn more.
We end our journey at Poets and Madmen, released March 5th, 2001. The band at this point is John Oliva back on lead vocals, Chris Caffrey, Johnny Lee Middleton, and Jeff Plate. The album hit number 49 on the Billboard Independent charts, number 7 in Germany, number 70 in Austria, number 95 in the Netherlands, and number 97 in Switzerland. There were 2 singles off of this one, Drive and Kommissar. Kommissar hit number 88 on the German chart. So really, this is only their second song to hit any chart around the world as far as a single goes. Poets and Madmen, a bit more of a disjointed concept album as far as storyline goes. But your thoughts now that John Oliva is back on vocals?
I didn't mind. I thought he sounded great. The single, when I was reading about the singles, the first tune I heard from this album before it came out was Awaken. That was getting played on, I think it's just the local metal station that was playing it. But I was like, wow, this sounds kind of like Back to Streets-ish.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like, I didn't hear any of this on radio. Maybe that's just, Canadian radio, and we got horrible radio stations up here. But off of this one, what did you end up going with?
I went with Awaken. Not because it's the first tune I heard from the album, but it just, this is Savatage. This sounds like everything I've loved about Savatage up to this point, and it still sounds like everything I love about Savatage is this song, Awaken.
I would have lost money. I took one look at the track that said at 10 minutes and 12 seconds, Morphine Child is probably going to be his pick. I would have lost money. I would have.
Yeah. Awaken just always grabbed me.
Awaken is on my short list, as is Morphine Child and There in the Silence. But I'm going with the last track on the last album of Savatage, Back to a Reason. This feels like kind of like the perfect bow. And as you mentioned, like as far as sounding like Savatage, Back to a Reason sounded like that for me. And John Oliva sounds fan-freaking-tastic on this song.
He's really good on this album.
Yeah.
He's great on the entire album.
For most of the time on this album, he's singing in that lower register, which is like the sweet spot for him. And I think I appreciated his lead vocals more on this album than I did in some of the earlier albums.
I could see that.
All right, so now we get to, of course, the hard part. So, Sean, please remind our listeners what your picks are. And then, if there can only be one Savatage song from the songs that you picked from those albums, what's it going to be?
Because I pulled that on the Madonna episode.
Yeah, you got one breaking of the rules. That's it.
Fair enough. So off of Sirens, I went with On the Run. Off of The Dungeons Are Calling, I went with By the Grace of the Witch. From Power of the Night, I went with Warriors. From Fight for the Rock, I went with The Edge of Midnight. Why Wouldn't You? From Hall of the Mountain King, I went with Hall of the Mountain King. From Gutter Ballet, I went with When the Crowds Are Gone. From Streets, I went with If I Go Away. From Edge of Thorns, I went with All That I Bleed. From Handful of Rain, I went with Chance. From Dead Winter Dead, I went with Not What You See. From The Wake of Magellan, I went with The Hourglass. And from Poets and Madmen, I went with Awaken. And if I had to have just one, I didn't think about this, and I'm an asshole for it. Wow.
You knew the assignment coming in.
I knew the assignment coming in, and I cannot choose. I will defer to you, and I will let you choose one for me. Streets and On, please. Streets and On, please. Or Gutter Ballet and On. Gutter Ballet. Not that I don't love the original stuff, like the earlier stuff, but Gutter Ballet and On is where I was like really getting into them. So Gutter Ballet and On.
Okay, I'll let you pontificate over this decision while I go through my list here.
Fair enough.
All right. So off of Sirens, I went with Scream Murder. From The Dungeons Are Calling, I went with City Beneath the Surface. Off of Power of the Night, I went with Power of the Night. From Fight for the Rock, I went for Crying for Love. Hall of the Mountain King, I went with Strange Wings. From Gutter Ballet, I went with Hounds. Off of Streets, a Rock Opera, I went with If I Go Away. Off of Edge of Thorns, I went with All That I Bleed. From Handful of Rain, I went with Stare Into the Sun. From Dead Winter Dead, I went with That Isn't What We Meant. From The Wake of Magellan, I went with The Wake of Magellan. And from Poets and Madmen, I went to Back to a Reason. Now, dear listeners, if you want to hear the songs that we have picked and want to understand why we're having a hard time trying to pick our songs, clearly I'm stalling. But you can go to our website, notthatbadcast.com, and go to the episode page for this episode of There Can Only Be One. On that page, you will find the playlist that Sean and I both made. So you can have a listen to the tracks that we have picked. And by the way, there's a comment section down below. So you can actually let us know where we were right, where we were wrong, and what your picks would have been. So you can suffer along with us in trying to pick only one song from these damn albums. But if I had to pick one song, and only one song, from all the albums that we've covered, I'm still stalling. And I think part of the problem here is that, as I mentioned earlier, you have songs off of concept albums, and it feels weird to pick just one part of a story as opposed to one song off of an album of just songs. But if I'm going to go with a song that just stopped me dead in my tracks and made me sit there and just go, wow, it was This Isn't What We Meant from Dead Winter Dead, off of my favorite Savatage album as a whole. So I'm going with my favorite song off of my favorite Savatage album after discovering this entire discography and preparing for this show. So now, Sean, I've given you enough time.
As I stood out on the watch deck looking out into the sea, I still have to choose. And you know what? I'm going to go with the song that hooked me from day one. I'm going to go with When the Crowds Are Gone. That's the song that I immediately fell in love with from day 2, All the Mountain King I Had Known. But yeah, my one is When the Crowds Are Gone.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for going through this and really introducing me to the full discography. Because again, when you only know like 1 or 2 songs, you're not getting like the full breadth of what a band is and what they've done. So that's why I kind of love going down episodes where I have zero idea what I'm getting into. This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much. Now, please remind our listeners what you're up to and where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Well, I am, still David Bryan at Slippery When Wet, New Jersey. Because we're doing this prog one, please check out the album Land by Money for the Toll. Now, when you look it up on YouTube, you're just going to get a lot of like Parkway videos and Turnpike videos like that. So make sure you type in Money for the Toll Land. But, buy it, don't stream it. Support the arts, please. Money for the Toll Land. It's kind of like the prog rock-ish thing that I like to do. And of course, please check out my new single, Status Quo Radio. It could have gone on the Final Cut or Roger Waters' solo album, Amused to Death. This has been told to me by other people, and I'm just sharing that with you. And of course, adopt. Don't shop. Spay and neuter your pets. Trust me, you are helping the animal community. And wow, and you know what? That makes me think of something. I want to do more for animals. So if you say Sean Faust, Gin Asylum, and you buy that song, you're helping me to help animals. And of course, Sean Faust Status Quo Radio, and a lot of episodes of There Can Only Be One, where it wasn't as hard to choose the one as this one was.
Or, go listen to my weekly mixtape and you can listen to me steal Tea Party from Sean Faust on the Trios episode.
Yes. And anytime you hear Jason on my weekly mixtape, you can hear him always like saving that Celine Dion tune for the perfect slot. And we're still waiting for it.
No, there will be no Celine Dion for my picks. None.
Seriously?
No. I
because
recognize...
I'm everything I am because you loved me.
No. I get it. Great Canadian icon. Full respect for everything she's done. Not going to make my pick. Unless, of course, we do songs written by Jim Steinman. And then we can talk.
Oh, there's a bunch of those. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so what about James Horner, the film score guy who...
Yeah.
But My Heart Will Go On? No. Near?
No.
Far?
No. Wherever you are. No. Not going to happen.
You're here. There's nothing I fear.
Right?
Dude, thanks for... we could babble on for years. Babylon AD, I think, only has 2 albums, so I guess we're not going to talk about them.
Well, we can always do a spin, shuffle, skip, so there's always that.
That is true, but dude, thank you again for having me on this show. It's always a blast. And it's always fun to talk actually, we've talked about my favorite bands so far.
Oh, it has been so much fun having you on, and don't worry, there's always a spot on the microphone for you, because we have so much fun here. Like, I get, dear listeners, and I know I'm diatribing here for a second, but there is a lot of work that goes into making a podcast when it comes to the research, making your notes. But when you get to do a show with people as fun as Sean, and the conversations are so much fun, it's no longer work. It is a ton of fun. So Sean, thank you for making all the work that goes into making this show painless, effortless, and worth every song.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you.
All right, dear listeners, time to thank you because you guys know the drill. If there's an artist that you want us to cover on There Can Only Be One, or an album like Babylon AD that you want us to cover on Spin, Shuffle, Skip, hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, get ready because we are going to soon be releasing the movies we're going to be talking about on our Grading on a Curve Movies of 2024 special. And I'm just going to apologize because I know those movies suck and we're going to have to watch them. so you don't have to. Until next time, he's Sean, I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is There Can Only Be One, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.